My 4-year-old daughter asked me, in the calmest voice I have ever heard from a child, if we could go visit the place where her body was buried. She said she missed the tree that grew over her. Her name is Mara. She was born in a hospital 2 blocks from our apartment, healthy and ordinary by every measure. She learned to walk at 13 months, loved strawberries, slept with a stuffed rabbit. There was nothing unusual about her first 3 years of life. Then, about 3 months before her 4th birthday, she started asking to go home. We were home. I would point that out, and she would look at me with what I can only describe as patient disappointment, the way you look at someone who has misunderstood something obvious. "Not this home," she would say, "my other home, the one with the yellow door." I told myself it was imaginative play. Kids invent things. I read a parenting forum post about children who claimed to remember being someone else. The comments were full of reassuring explanations about developing imaginations. I bookmarked it and tried to stop thinking about her voice when she said it. That calm, certain, unbothered voice. Then the drawing started. Mara had always drawn the same things most kids draw: suns, our family, the rabbit. But that autumn she began drawing a different house, over and over, with total consistency. A 2-story building, narrow, a covered porch, a large tree to the left, and always that yellow door. Every version was the same. I started asking careful questions. Not leading ones, I was careful about that. I would let her bring it up and then just listen. She told me over the course of several weeks that her old name had been Annie, that she had lived with her mama and her daddy and a dog named Soot, that her daddy fixed cars. She told me the town was near a river, that there were lots of trees, that it got very cold in winter. She said their church had a green roof. She said the street was called something with a bird in it. Then she told me she had gotten sick, that it had been in her chest, that she had died in her bed while it was snowing outside. She said all of this without any drama, no tears, no fear, the way you might describe a holiday you took a long time ago, something sad but finished. She looked at me when she was done and said, "I don't mind, but I'd like to see the tree." I told my husband, Daniel. He reacted the way I expected. He said it was her imagination, that kids absorbed things from TV and conversation, that we probably mentioned something about a yellow house once without realizing it. I nodded. I kept the drawings in a folder in the kitchen drawer. What broke me was the name. I had started, quietly and privately, doing searches. Town near a river, lots of trees, cold winters, green roof church. I was just going to disprove it. I was going to find nothing and feel better. I found a small town about 4 hours north that matched the geography. River on the west side, heavily forested. I found an old church with a green copper roof, the kind that turns green with age. The street beside it was called Wren Lane, a street with a bird in the name. I sat with that for a long time. I searched death records for that county going back about 90 years, digitized archives from a local genealogy library. I was looking for a girl named Annie, a child, cause of death involving the lungs, winter, a father who worked as a mechanic. I found her. An entry for a girl, age 7, first name Anne, last name I won't write here, died of pneumonia in February. Her father's listed occupation was auto repair. The year was decades before Mara was born. The address on the record was on Wren Lane. I did not tell Daniel right away. I needed to think. I needed to understand what I was holding. I had a name, a street, a cause of death that matched what my 4-year-old had told me casually over cereal. Either my daughter had somehow come across an obscure digitized death record from a county archive 4 hours away, or something else was true, something I did not have a category for. I went back to Mara. Very carefully. I asked her if she remembered what the house looked like inside. She described a narrow staircase with a wooden railing, a kitchen with a blue rug, a bedroom window that faced the big tree. She said there was a photograph on the mantel of a man in a dark jacket. She told me the cemetery was behind the church. She said her stone was small and white, and the oak tree she liked had grown over it now, its roots probably touching everything underneath. "The roots are probably touching me," she said, and then she smiled and went back to drawing. It was the smile that made it hard to breathe. I told Daniel everything that night. The name, the street, the record. I watched him go from dismissive to quiet, to something I can only call shaken. He read the archive printout 3 times. Then he said very carefully that we should go, that we had to know. We drove north on a Saturday in November. We did not tell Mara where we were going. We said we were going on an adventure to a new town, which she accepted without much interest. She spent most of the drive looking out the window at the trees. About 20 minutes out from the town, still on the highway, Mara said quietly from the back seat, "We're getting close." Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. I turned around. She was still looking out the window, perfectly calm. "How do you know?" I asked. She pointed to her left. "The river is over there," she said. It was. I could not see it from the road, but I knew from the map that the river ran parallel to the highway on the left side. She could not have known that from the car. We entered the town just after 9 in the morning. It was small, quiet, cold, the streets mostly empty. Mara pressed her face against the window and said, "It changed, but it still smells the same." I do not know what she could smell with the windows up. We found Wren Lane easily. It was a short residential street, a block from the church. We drove slowly. Mara went completely silent. There were maybe 8 houses on the street. The fourth one on the left was narrow, 2 stories with a covered porch, a large leafless tree in the yard to the left of the house. The door was white now, but the wood around the door frame was stained, faintly yellow, the ghost of old paint. Mara made a sound I had never heard from her. "Not crying, something quieter," she said. "They painted it." Then, after a moment, "That's okay. I will tell you what happened at the cemetery next, but I need you to follow this channel first, because the next part is the one that I still cannot explain to myself, even now, and that I think about every single night before I fall asleep." We parked near the church. Daniel stayed with Mara while I went to look at the churchyard first, just to see if it was real, just to see if any of it was real. The cemetery was behind the church, exactly as she had said. Small, old, shaded by several large trees, one oak in particular, enormous, its roots rippling across the older section of the ground like something slow and unstoppable. I walked to the oldest section, under the oak. I read the stones slowly. Many of the markers were weathered past reading, the names worn down to almost nothing. Then I found one, small white marble gone gray-green with lichen. I crouched down and scraped at the surface with my thumb. The first name was still clear. Anne. I read it twice. I read it 5 times. I sat down in the wet grass and I did not get up for a while. Daniel brought Mara over eventually. I couldn't speak, I just pointed. He read the stone and put his hand on my shoulder and said nothing because there was nothing to say. Mara looked at the stone for a long moment. She did not seem frightened or upset. She crouched down, the way kids do, knees wide, and she put her hand flat on top of the stone. She held it there. Then she said, "Hi." Just that. Hi. We stood in that cemetery for maybe 15 minutes. None of us spoke much. Then Mara stood up, took my hand, and said she was hungry and could we get pancakes. Just like that. Back to being 4. We got pancakes. We drove home. Mara fell asleep in the car before we even left the town. She has not mentioned Annie since. That was 6 months ago. She hasn't asked to go home, hasn't drawn the yellow doorhouse, hasn't talked about soot or the narrow staircase or the blue rug. Whatever door was open seems, at least for now, to be closed. I still have the drawings. I have the printed archive record. I have a photograph I took in the cemetery, my phone camera slightly damp from the fog, of that small gray stone with the name on it and the roots pressed up against it on both sides like hands. I look at it sometimes late at night when I can't sleep. There are things I cannot resolve. I do not know how she knew the street name. I do not know how she knew a name that was in an archive she could not access. I do not know why she stopped talking about it after we visited. I don't know if visiting was what she needed, or if something else ended it. What I do know is this. The last night we were working through the records, the night before we drove up, Mara woke up at around 2 in the morning and came to the doorway of the kitchen where I was sitting. She stood there in her pajamas with the rabbit under her arm, and she looked at what was on my screen, the archive page with the name and the address and the date. She looked at it for a second. Then she looked at me. And she nodded, very slowly, like she was confirming something. She went back to bed without a word. I sat there until morning. I don't have an explanation. I don't think I'm going to get one. What I have is a folder in a kitchen drawer, a photograph on my phone, and a daughter who is currently asleep upstairs and who has, as far as I know, only ever been born once. At least, that is what I tell myself when the house is quiet and her bedroom door is closed, and I am sitting downstairs trying not to think about the way she nodded. Slowly, like she already knew,